Ukrainian officials say 2 people were killed when a Russian missile hit a hotel in Kryvyi Rih, President Zelensky's hometown. 29 others were injured. Rescue workers have been pulling survivors from the rubble. The strike came hours after the United States confirmed it had stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine, making it more difficult to prevent Russian attacks. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Laskiewicz. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's start with the latest lines that we're hearing, and that is that President Trump is planning to revoke the temporary legal status given to some 240,000 Ukrainians who fled to the US after the war with Russia began. This potentially puts them on the fast track to deportation, and that's a stunning reversal of the welcome Ukrainians received under President Biden's administration. What's your reaction to that planned move by Mr. Trump?
It confirms that Trump is determined to secure a peace deal, of details of which we do not know, and this is further pressurizing Zelensky. As you rightly point out, this is the sort of anti-welcome. And that means that it's just one more sign that Ukraine, unless it toes the line that USA wants, will suffer consequences. And please note, in the other area, Gaza, he has made it quite clear he is prepared to back whatever consequences come all the way. So it is a very serious sign, along with the lack of intelligence sharing, which you also referred to.
Indeed, and I was just going to bring up that intelligence, that stopping of sharing intelligence with Ukraine by the United States, which potentially makes it more difficult to prevent Russian attacks. And I don't know if it's related or not, but of course we saw that attack on President Zelensky's hometown earlier today.
Quite right. In comparison to the stopping of aid, which will have its effects, but not immediately, because Ukraine has enough reserves to survive a few months. And if it were to be restored, there will be no real effect. The sharing of intelligence is crucial for Ukraine, and therefore the fact it's being withdrawn already right now weakens Ukrainian forces. It means that Russia has gained an upper hand in this respect, and owing to American intelligence, many Russian attacks were stopped. This will no longer be the case. Russia has a very clear green light to advance, should it choose to do so. And the fact it was an attack on his hometown was quite deliberate, to coincide with the European conference and to show everyone that Russia is taking full advantage of this now new approach by USA.
And of course, with the US appearing to pivot towards Russia, I mean, I imagine there's considerable concern in Ukraine about being forced into the sort of peace deal that would ultimately not be advantageous to Ukraine.
Quite right. And this will be in keeping with what I wrote many years ago, that Ukraine will not win such a war with Russia, and Russia will carry on, because having had its appetite whetted by success in Ukraine, there's no obvious reason why it should stop. And please note, we still don't know what President Trump has in mind, and the terms, as far from being advantageous to Ukraine, may be very disadvantageous. But nevertheless, President Trump is quite determined, clearly, to enforce a peace. And indeed, just to add one minor note to all this, he has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, should he succeed. So he's got every, I should put it, incentive to press on.
And I wonder what you think, Dr. Laskiewicz, by what appears to be the US wanting to end the war and sounding as if the Ukrainians don't, whereas one would have thought that the Ukrainians want to end it even more, because, I mean, it is their soldiers who are defending their country and dying, and it is their cities that are getting destroyed.
Actually, oddly enough, that echoes what President Trump is saying. It's he who has said all this. The Ukrainian president and many Ukrainians want a victory. That is to say, all Russian occupiers of their previous territory, and they do not want anything less than that. So when President Zelensky says about peace proposals, he has made them before, but they were not serious in the sense that there was no chance that Russia would agree with them. And therefore, President Zelensky, and this is what Trump was referring to, actually is less desirous of peace per se. He wants a peace on his terms. And of course, Russia also wants the peace on their terms. And therefore, it is actually the case that we have to see whether President Zelensky will accept Donald Trump's proposals, but it is unlikely given everything that has happened up till now. Moreover, President Zelensky has support from Europe and may well feel emboldened to simply reject President Donald Trump's peace proposals were they insufficiently good for Ukraine, which will be, of course, very serious because it will put us to one step further towards a real war, World War III.
And of course, it has often been said by the Ukrainians that if Russia was to stop fighting, the war would end. But if Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine will end. I mean, how true is that statement in your assessment?
Oh, it's very accurate. They're quite right about it. There's another Ukrainian superb joke, if you like, that America and Europe previously were prepared to fight to the last Ukrainian. The Ukrainians know perfectly well what is happening, and that Russia really would like to conquer the whole of Ukraine, which is what President Putin had in mind when he said some years ago that he could take Kiev in 2 days. And what he meant was conquer Ukraine entirely. Now, this being the case, the question is, will Ukraine want to carry on? President Zelensky is quite clearly saying yes, but, and there's another aspect very important about President Donald Trump's work, he has been in contact with the opposition groups to President Zelensky in Ukraine, hoping, and may well more than hope, to be able to hold elections which President Donald Trump presumably imagines will support his peace proposals. That's a further aspect of USA's work at present.
And as you know, all 27 countries in the EU are meeting in Brussels today after a week in which everything has essentially changed. I mean, with so much at stake, what do you think the summit should be focusing on?
The central problem with the European and the EU is that it's a load of talk. You see, it's all very well talking, it's all very well planning, but actually doing something. Now, setting aside the central problem that all European states are not agreed, Hungary and Slovakia, for example, are pro-Russian. The second aspect is it takes years to develop a real military, which, of course, is not going to be overnight, so of not immediate war-winning potential for Ukraine. And the last point is whether the Europeans actually will go ahead and spend such money, because again, what politicians say and what actually happens are two different things. It therefore follows that although the conference indeed is a booster for President Zelensky in the sense it supports him, actually in terms of material worth right now, it's only USA which is supplying with the aid that enable him to hold off the Russians. And as President Donald Trump has stated, and is making no doubts about this, he is not prepared to supply that indefinitely. And so therefore this European conference, as high-sounding as it is, as wonderful as it sounds, actually is of limited use right now for this war as it is taking place.
And what's your reaction to what Emmanuel Macron of France had to say about the shifting changes in US sort of foreign policy with all its warts and blemishes since the return of Donald Trump to the White House?
He is quite correct in stating there has been an upending of all previous values, including the fact that NATO has disappeared completely off the map. No one mentions it anymore. However, I felt he went one step too far, which Sir Keir Starmer, for example, does not. He now makes it quite clear that in fact there's a difference between USA and Europe is to go it entirely alone. Whereas Keir Starmer keeps saying that we should still work with America, which I think is the better way of going about it, because the European Union shouldn't be seen as an enemy of any sort to America, since after all there are many shared values. However, having said that, he has now said what he's saying. There will be a tariffs policy, but of course, when we're going to blame Donald Trump for his tariffs, please note, other nations also have tariffs, and this is not taken into account, because if Donald Trump merely wants to do retaliatory tariffs, in other words, 20% by France will be 20% by USA, well, that's more or less understandable. And so therefore, how far his tariffs policy will go is yet to be seen. But the implication that Europe is now, so to speak, totally divorced from USA is a bad one. But incidentally, insofar as Europe has suddenly taken on board that it has to protect itself, spend money for itself, and not ride on American coattails, this is exactly what Donald Trump wants. He has stated that countries have for too long been living off the USA, and he as a businessman does not like this, and therefore to that extent, he has succeeded. Europe, for the first time ever, is openly talking about paying for its own defense, which, please note, no other president has achieved.
Indeed. And beyond that, Mr. Trump does appear to have put genuine fear in European capitals, doesn't he? I mean, might he end up inadvertently being the great unifier of Europe?
Very nicely put. I do like that. There is always the point, of course, that nothing unifies better than an opposition. And in that case, yes, he might well be the great unifier. The central problem with the unification process is that not everybody agrees with Macron's assessment. For example, Orban of Hungary does not. And of course, Slovakia is along with Hungary. Moreover, many people within Europe have mixed feelings about this business about going the whole way and trying to take on the Russians and trying to endlessly supply Ukraine with arms. So underneath this apparent unity, there lie many points of disunity, and therefore it's by no means as clear-cut as that. But what you are correct in saying is that by virtue of him backing out, Europe has finally, as I stated a moment ago, taking its own defense in charge. And the notion of them all meeting and considering this, and to that extent being unified, yes, that is very much his effect and exactly what he wants.
Dr. Laskiewicz, always a delight having the benefit of your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst, and he was talking to me on the line from London.